Welcome to Beacon of Speech. I'm Fred Hunt. That's Ted Coley. Hey, Ted Coley, how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing awesome. We are Beacon of Speech. What is Beacon of Speech? We say whatever the hell I want, and I step all over Ted for about an hour and a half. Would you say that's fair? Today.
For some reason, when I'm looking at your shirt, isn't it like something they would wear on Charlie Brown or something?
Yeah, it
one
does
of them
look
have
like
a shirt like that?
Charlie Brown had a shirt, but it had like lines up and down. It's very similar. We are Beacon of Speech. We're going to be talking a lot about liberty in America. Now, does that sound like fun?
Mm-hmm.
No, you think that sucks. We're going to make liberty in America fun for Ted Coley. Okay, now, how do we make liberty in America fun for Ted Coley? We're going to talk about Artie Lange. Okay? Now, for those who don't know, Artie Lange used to be on the Howard Stern show. Howard Stern told his story in Private Parts, the movie. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
He was a poor, dorky Jewish boy growing up in New York. He went to Detroit, and he worked his way up the ladder from local nobody to king of all media. Now, once Howard Stern was down here, he met Fred, he met Robin, he met, who else did he meet?
Gary.
He met Gary, and he worked his way up. Once he was near the pinnacle of his profession, he was looking for a sidekick, and he met Artie Lange, and he hired Artie Lange. Some people would argue that once Fred left and Artie came, those were the best years.
Oh, you mean Jackie.
Jackie, I'm sorry. Yeah. I said Fred. I meant Jackie. I'm sorry. See, I already misspoke. So, some people say the best years were the Jackie years. Some people say that the best years were the Artie years. I think the best years were the Artie years. I didn't listen to the Fred years for very long. Okay? Now, who did you prefer, Fred or... I'm sorry, who did you prefer, Artie or Jackie?
You know, each of them have... I don't know if I can choose.
Okay.
Because each of them have a special place in my heart.
Okay. Well, we'll go from there. Howard Stern used to complain about Jackie that all he was ever doing was pitching stuff. Pitching stuff, buy my joke machine, buy this, buy that. Go to the Jackie the Joke Man website. Howard Stern tired of someone else sucking the air out of the room. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah.
Because Jackie was like, Jackie, so buy the joke about... You see what I'm saying? Artie Lange was all about laughs. Now, at the end, Howard Stern tired of Artie, not because he was a selfless self-promoter, but because he did tons and tons and tons of drugs. Right. Would you say that's fair?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the whole Marilyn Manson theory. Marilyn Manson used to say, I don't give a F about how many drugs you do as long as you show up for the concert. You see what I'm saying? Would you say that Howard Stern subscribed to the Marilyn Manson theory?
Yeah.
I don't care what you do in your spare time as long as you show up at 6 for the show.
Yeah.
Would you say that's fair?
I would think so, yeah.
So when Artie disappeared is when Howard Stern said, I'm done with Artie because I can't trust him anymore. Would you say that's fair?
That's what happened? That he just disappeared?
Yeah, he disappeared, and then they tried to send him to rehab, then they didn't know up from down. Howard Stern had to do what was best for the Howard Stern Show. Again, his name is on the show. Okay? Now, Howard Stern, grab your book. Howard Stern wrote a book, and it was a #1 bestseller. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yeah.
And then they made a movie out of it, and it made a ton of money. And in Howard's mind, he is the greatest. No one else could ever write another bestseller. Well, Artie wrote a #1 bestseller called Too Fat to Fish. And then he wrote a second book. Now he's on his third book.
Oh, that's his third.
This is his third book. Want to bet? Right? Ted pointed something out before we did the show. I want to point this out. This is from Private Parts. Flip it over. Now, this is the back of Private Parts. Right? Now, that is very nice. That sums up Howard Stern. Artie Lange's third book. We're going to slide that back up here. Artie Lange's book. Wow, it looks like a direct parody of Howard Stern's first book. Okay? I'm looking. I want to make sure we weren't glitching.
Yeah, did everybody see that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's basically the same thing. It's the same concept, right? And Howard Stern probably doesn't appreciate it because someone else is sucking the air out of his room. Okay? I did not read Too Fat to Fish. I did not read Private Parts. But I read Artie's second book, and this week in one day I plowed through Roundabout. Okay, this book is excellent. If you get a chance, Ted, you should read it. But why are we talking about it on Beacon of Speech? Last week we were hard on Artie. We said Artie looked like death, blah, blah, blah. I read his book, and Artie named the book Wanna Bet because he bets on everything. Okay, and when I say everything, I mean everything. His whole concept of his book is he bet his life a number of times. And sometimes it worked out, and sometimes it didn't work out. He bet his life. He took the dice, and he rolled the dice with his life. Okay, now, Ted Coley, have you rolled the dice with your life very often?
No.
No, I have not either. So if we say Beacon of Speech is basically a libertarian website, it's not, but we'll say for argument's sake it's a libertarian website. Artie Lange is a libertarian, okay? I should be free to do whatever I want. Last 8 pages, he basically says, I don't regret anything except for the heroin, okay? Kids at home, don't do heroin. In the book, he talks about heroin. Don't do Oxycontin. Don't do anything in the heroin family. With that being said, as our disclaimer, don't do heroin. Everything else in the book we're going to talk about today. Okay, we're going to start. I marked 4 pages, and everything's going to spin off of these 4 pages. Okay? Artie Lange went to high school in New York City, in the working class part of Brooklyn. Queens, Brooklyn, out in the neighborhoods, right? His dad worked hard. He worked on the docks. Artie got a job on the docks, okay? Now, I want you to flash back to 1991. Where were you working in 1991? You don't have to say the place's name, but where were you working? Do you know where you were working in 1991? Were you working at, because it doesn't exist anymore, I'm going to say the name, were you working at Data Guard in 91?
No, Arcus.
Arcus in 91. Okay, now, when you worked for Arcus, how did you get that job? Arcus doesn't exist anymore.
How did I get that job?
Yeah.
Well, they bought DataGuard.
Okay. So they bought DataGuard, but we'll go back to DataGuard. We're going to go back one step because DataGuard doesn't exist, Arcus doesn't exist anymore. When you applied for the job, how much did you get paid?
I think
And round numbers are fine.
$5 an hour.
$5 an hour. We'll use that. You made $5 an hour, so at $5 an hour, you are probably making around 15, 18 grand a year. Would you say that's fair?
Oh, probably not even that.
Well, we'll just say, to argue, 15 grand a year. Okay? So you were working full-time for 15 grand a year. Okay? Now, did your mom or dad get you that job?
No.
You got that job because you saw one ad, got that job.
Right.
Right? Artie's first job was a longshoreman. Now, how do you get a job as a longshoreman?
I don't know.
Artie's dad knew a guy who knew a guy, right? In 1991, Artie got a job as a longshoreman for 70 grand a year. Okay? Now, here's the catch. Now, me and Ted have both been very surly lately about you don't get ahead in life unless you cheat or unless you sell drugs. Okay? Now, did Artie cheat at the beginning of his life?
Probably not.
He did. Artie Lange, and I have it in here, first thing, he got a job for 70 grand a year because he knew a guy who knew a guy. How did because he's our age.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how did a 22-year-old make 70 grand as a longshoreman? It was run by the mob. So he was making 70 grand unloading boxes. Which is still hard work.
Yeah.
Me and you couldn't have probably done it because we're not big, strong guys, right? We probably couldn't have made 70 grand, But here's the catch. During the day, he would unload boxes, and then he would take a 2-hour lunch and be like, Artie, you have to do your other job. And Artie's like, oh, other job? Okay, I'll see you later. I'll be back in the afternoon to unload boxes. Right? And then he worked the phones. He worked for the mob, and he would place, I can't remember the technicalities of it, but the mob wanted a layer between the people who placed the bets and the mob. So in case that person got wiretapped, they weren't on the phone. So he was the middleman for the mob and the gamblers. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That year that he made 70 grand unloading, he made 90 grand working for the mob. Now, he made $160,000 at 22 years old, right? And that's what he talks about in the book. He bet his life. He's like, I don't want to go working anywhere for 50 grand, 40 grand, 20 grand, 15 grand, right? Because I was working for Taco Bell. I was probably making about the same as you, okay? And he said, I want to make big money. Now, he also had a friend who was doing illegal stuff, but not with the mob. He was kind of an independent contractor, right? The guy who was an independent contractor who went to his high school, okay? He was a criminal, and he was a harder criminal than Artie Lange. Artie Lange's your buddy, right? Hey, I'm just a go-between. I'm taking phone calls. I'm making bets, blah, 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 right? Which goes back to the title, Wanna Bet. Right? And you're going to like this story even less and less.
So now wait a minute. If he's taking those calls and there's like a sting or whatever and the government finds him on those phone calls, right, he gets in trouble.
He gets in trouble. And so Artie Lange's like, wow, I got to be real smart about this. And so he actually, because he's making 160 grand a year, Al Capone, you remember when they caught Al Capone? He was making millions and millions. They didn't catch him doing the bad stuff. They caught him because he didn't pay taxes on his ill-gotten gains. So Artie Lange is making 90 grand on the side. He actually has an accountant, and the accountant goes, listen. I don't care what the hell you're doing. You live in New Jersey. You're going to write on your taxes that you are a driver and you're an independent contractor and you're going to pay taxes on that 90 grand. Right. So he's paying taxes on the 70 grand, which is legit, and then he's paying taxes on the 90 grand, which is not legit, but he's still paying taxes. So there's no red flags to the government because the government doesn't give a F what you're doing as long as they get their cut. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Artie Lange had a friend who was a criminal, not with the mob. He got caught. He wasn't paying taxes, and he was doing all kinds of other things. And Artie's like, oh man, I think it sucks that you got caught doing all this stuff. What happened to Artie Lange's friend who wasn't protected by the mob?
He probably went to jail. He
went to jail at 24. He was the toughest guy in the school at 25. I'm going to read a quote from the book. So if it plows down, if it slows way down, right? Blah, blah, blah. Let's use my friend's life as an indication of what would have happened to me if I went to prison. My friend got raped by a guy in the shower, then got AIDS. Then he died behind bars of AIDS. That's what happened to my buddy from biology class, and I can't think of a darker way to go. Dying of full-blown AIDS in a prison hospital at 25. So Artie says he won his first bet. He went to work for the mob and won. His buddy didn't go to work for the mob. He was just a criminal, and he lost. 25, he's dead of AIDS. Right? So now looking back, me and you made a smart bet by not creating our own enterprise. Mm-hmm. Artie Lange said, sooner or later, I will be busted by the mob. I want to go into stand-up comedy. Asked his mom's permission, reinvested some of that $160,000 into himself. You see what I'm saying? Which is a smart bet, right? He went to broadcasting school. Artie Lange says at the end of the book, I believe my mom knew what I was doing and did not want me to end up in jail for the rest of my life. Because moms know. Your mom knows, my mom knows. Right? So Artie Lange says right from the beginning, I was betting. I bet my life because I don't want to be poor. I want to make money. I want to make money. How do I make money in America? I'm going to go work for the mob. He says it. On page 53, I went to work for the mob. Right? And now what are they going to do? It's 30 years later. You see what I'm saying? And Artie's not who they were looking for. They're not looking for the low man. Through the years, they got the mob, the John Gottis, and the people like Artie ended up getting out of it, or they died, or went to prison and got raped in the ass. And Artie Lange is very graphic. You'll have to read about it, right? But here, let me see. You ready? You ready for my next awesome quote? This guy was a tough kid in high school, too. Nobody messed with him. He went from that to being someone's girlfriend in prison. He used to call one of our friends crying, telling us what was happening in prison. Right? Blah, blah, blah. Yakety schmackety. Dun, dun, dun. Let me see what I got. Okay. Risk is a fascinating thing. It's seductive and necessary. It could bring you everything or take all that you've got. We all take risks. If it wasn't for my mom taking a chance on me, my life wouldn't have been very funny, right? Blah, blah, blah. Instead of, and this is Artie talking, instead of living in a penthouse, I'd be living in a cell. Instead of a girlfriend with big tits, I'd have a boyfriend with big tits. Instead of sending my hot girlfriend out for a pack of cigarettes, I get sold as a girlfriend for a pack of cigarettes, right? Instead of never seeing or hearing my girlfriend crap, I do nothing but see and hear my boyfriend crap. Instead of having a girlfriend who is about 25 in my life, I'd have someone's girlfriend for about 25 to life. Right? So that's one of the first chapters of the book. Artie Lange took a major risk, and if he would have stayed at, working the docks, he would have never made it. Right? So.
I'm already depressed.
Artie Lange basically says his whole life was gambling. Gambling, gambling, gambling. Right? Now, here's my next quote. We'll move on to that. Right? Now, our old boss, you know how he used to go out gambling all the time, right? Artie Lange says that he used to gamble all the time. Before every, I'm not going to read this on the air, but before every jerk off, every F word played Texas Hold'em. Does our old boss play Texas Hold'em when he goes to the casino?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
But there's lots of cursing in the book. There's lots of swearing. And they said that all these guys like Ben Affleck who go on these shows and they're like, we're gamblers. They're like, they're not gamblers. They're wannabes. Right? And again, it goes back to, the Ben Afflecks of the world. We're bored. We want to gamble legally. You see what I'm saying? Artie Lange's like, listen, I was all about gambling. I was gambling before you knew up from down. I knew what spreads. I knew what cuts. I knew overs, unders. You see what I'm saying? And so in my head, all I can think of is if Artie Lange didn't break the law, he would not have gotten anywhere in his life. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah.
He would have died. But he also could have died at 25. You see what I'm saying? So now, aren't you glad I brought that up? Okay. Let me read you another awesome quote. Okay. He's talking about all the people who are phonies in Hollywood. And they are acting like they're splitting the atom, like Ben Affleck for $20 million a year. He said acting is the easiest thing he ever did, the easiest money he ever made, right? And one of the quotes he had was a TV executive called him and said, please don't say it's the easiest money you ever made. A lot of other actors are complaining about you, saying that it's hard to act, okay? Artie Lange's no, it's not. I made $35,000 an episode on the Norm show just by basically being Norm's sidekick. It's the easiest thing in the world. So Ted has one of Ted's. We're gonna pick on you a little bit here. One of your pet peeves is people who say I work 24/7, right? So when actors are like, we never leave character, that's gotta drive you crazy, right? For $20 million, I'm never leaving character. Okay, let's go back to the next quote on Artie Lange got in a whole bunch of trouble, right? Now, we are a free speech site, so we're going to say some more stuff. One of the things Artie Lange said is that Bruce Jenner has a vagina, and he would get laughs all over the place, right? Now, is that factually correct?
I don't know. I think it is. I don't know. Did he have surgery or?
I don't know if he did or not. But he said, in my mind, that's Bruce Jenner, the decathlete from 1976. And he would call him the male pronoun, and everybody would complain about Artie Lange. Artie Lange's not politically correct. And it goes back to, you can sell anything you want. You see what I'm saying? And Artie Lange's like, listen, I'm not slandering him. I'm a stand-up comic. I'm supposed to make you laugh. I say Bruce Jenner has a vagina, and people laughed, and now people are mad at me. I don't care because my check cleared, right? You see what I'm getting at there? So, blah, blah, blah. Do you remember when Bruce Jenner, he started to have the transition surgery, and then he got in a car accident and he killed those people, right?
Yeah.
And then Artie Lange's like, Bruce Jenner killed people. And they're like, that's wrong. And they're like, why is it wrong? They're like, because it's Caitlyn Jenner. Okay, well, then Caitlyn Jenner killed those people. It doesn't matter whether he's a male, female, vagina, no vagina. He killed those people. And all people are yelling at me about is I'm using the wrong goddamn pronoun. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
And he's like, nowadays, he's like, people are phony balonies.
Yeah.
From top to bottom, you can say the truth, but the truth isn't PC. You see what I'm getting at? And so his whole thing in the middle of the book is he's swearing, he's using the N-word, the F-word, the other F-word. He's using derogatory language for Muslims, for Jews, for blacks, all the way around. Everybody, it's like bang, 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 slander, 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 slander. You see what I'm saying? And Artie Lange's like, I don't care. I already won. I'm on the Howard Stern show. I made $1 million. What are you going to do to me? You can't send me to jail for using the N-word. Now, we're not going to use the N-word on our show because I don't believe we should.
Yeah.
Right? But he did in this book at least 100 times. Right? Maybe not just the N-word and the F-word and the other F-word and then the K-word. You see what I'm getting at? And he's like, I already won. When I come up and I do my stand-up, I put on a crappy show. People are like, boo, Artie, you suck. And then I go and I'm like, well, it was a bad night of stand-up. Collects his check, walks away, cashes his check.
Yeah.
I made money doing stand-up. And he is very unapologetic. And that's what I love about the Artie Lange book. Is he goes, people are all about this, that. And the other thing, he's like, at the end of the day, I am an ugly dude, right? He goes, and he's very self-deprecating. I am an ugly fat man who got laid by hundreds of women. Granted, I paid for half of them, but say I cash a check for $50,000, and then I get a prostitute for $10,000, right? Well, that's still a win for the night. I still slept at the end of the night with a beautiful woman. You see what I'm getting at? And he's like, so I won. And it's like, you know what? When you break it down to brass tacks, he did. You see what I'm saying? If you're a red-blooded American guy, and I like to think me and Ted are, but maybe you're like, oh no, they're pussies like Ben Affleck, right? Artie Lange is like, I did. And sometimes I paid for women, and sometimes I didn't. And I paid, and I didn't get caught. And even when I did get caught, I paid the $500 fine, and I was still up because I made $50,000 that night doing stand-up.
So he's never been married, right?
He had a serious girlfriend on the Howard Stern show, Dana.
Yeah, I think I do remember that.
And on this book, he said that when he went to Vegas with the Howard Stern show, everybody else was happily married, and he went to Vegas, and he goes, I had a girlfriend, and I felt really bad, but hot Vegas women were throwing themselves at me. And he said, so I told her I cheated once, and she forgave me. I lied, I cheated about 13 times, right? Which is very impressive for a week in Vegas, right? And he goes, some of those girls just threw themselves at me. So the point of the book is what is winning and what is losing. Because me and you talk about this all the time. What do you win? What do you win by playing by the rules? Well, sometimes you crap out, right? And Artie comes back to that poor schlub who died in jail of AIDS at 25. Yeah. And it's like, you know what? I was not willing to risk that, right? I don't think you were willing to risk that. So the poor guy at 25, he could have been Artie. Artie could have been dead. No book. But how did you get ahead in America? Artie Lange's like, well, everybody takes risks. That guy takes risks. You take risks. I take risks. You see what I'm saying? There's a certain amount of risk we do with Beacon of Speech. But it's a low risk. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Worst comes to worst, somebody says we don't like Fred, or one of our bosses says we saw the webcast, it was terrible, and if you don't stop it, we're gonna fire you. And then all of a sudden we gotta shut our windows and be like, oh, I guess we gotta stop the webcast. You see what I'm saying? So what is your level of risk in life? And again, that shouldn't be... Artie Lange says, I'm not the most talented guy. He says, when I was in high school, he goes, I wasn't the toughest guy. The toughest guy died in jail of AIDS, right? I wasn't the funniest guy. But the funniest guy, he knocked up a girl at 18, and then he went to work at the corner deli, right, or whatever, and he's making $30,000 a year today with his 4K. You see what I'm saying? So what is your risk? And philosophically, it is an intriguing book, because in America, me and you have been sold, whoever works the hardest gets ahead. And when I was a young man, I used to think, wow, whoever works the hardest gets ahead. And you thought that too, right? Mm-hmm. Now, do you believe that anymore?
No.
And I don't believe that either. And I'm telling you, I stopped believing it. I remember exactly when I stopped believing it. Noam Chomsky, right? The famous left-winger, right? Mm-hmm. He came out and he said his dad worked in a factory 16 hours a day. And he had to support the 3 kids and the wife who stayed at home. And he said that he worked his butt off. And he said the people who got ahead were the people who exploited his dad, right? And at the end of the day, his dad's like, I'm a simple man. I just want to go work in the factory or whatever it was. And it came... And going back in my life to when I worked at Taco Bell in Iron Mountain and seeing my friends and people who got ahead and who didn't, I saw a lot of people who got ahead by exploiting the people who did work. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm getting at? Yeah. And so Artie Lange's book wasn't an insult. Artie Lange was like, listen, I don't want to work on the longshore. I don't want to be a longshoreman and, have a bad back and... he even says in the book that if he would have had a wife and 2 kids, he would have been cheating on them all the time. Not the kids, but the wife with even uglier women, because that's just how he's wired. Yeah. Right? He's not wired to settle down. Right? And some people never know that. Right? So, but let me go into my next quote.
He knows who he is.
Oh, yeah, he knows who he is. Okay, my next quote. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, yeah, we kind of talked about this one. This is talking about the $160,000. Because he called them $1,000 phone calls, right? He had to take the $1,000 phone calls for the mob. Okay, let's go over here. And like I said, you'll get a good kick out of this one. This is an awesome story, okay? Now, think back to classic Saturday Night Live. Okay, what was your favorite Saturday Night Live? I'll tell you mine, and then you can tell me yours.
What, the cast, or?
Oh, yeah, the cast. But my favorite cast was the years with Norm Macdonald. when Norm Macdonald was doing the news, that was the funniest thing in the whole world. Norm Macdonald. And I liked Adam Sandler. I liked seeing Opera Man. Opera Man rolls over to Norm, and Norm's like, "Oh, hey, it's Opera Man." He's like, "Oh, Normie." Oh, and he's doing the opera thing, right? Funniest thing in the world. David Spade, taking runs at Eddie Murphy. That's hysterical to me. I didn't like David Spade like in any skits, but he was good on Weekend Update. Chris Farley, that era, right? Now, do you remember none of those guys made it 10 years like now, right?
Mm-hmm.
You remember they all got fired. Adam Sandler got fired. He went on Saturday Night Live a couple months ago and he sang the "I'm Fired" song. Hey, Dad, how come you didn't go back? Because I was fired, right? So the funniest thing in the world was they were all fired. But they all loved Chris Farley, right? They all loved Chris Farley. And so 2 years after they were fired, Lorne Michaels knew that Chris Farley was in bad shape, right? And he goes, listen, why don't you come back and host Saturday Night Live? And Chris Farley's like, I'll host Saturday Night Live. Sounds like the best time in the world, right? Norm Macdonald loved Chris Farley. And at the time, they were doing Dirty Work. You remember the clip I showed you? Mm-hmm. So Norm says, hey, Artie, let's go see Saturday Night Live. I used to be in the cast. We'll go watch Chris, right? It'll be the best time ever. We'll meet Adam Sandler there. We'll have a great time, right? So this is the highlight of the whole book. So sorry, Artie, if I spoil it. Nobody will watch us for a while anyhow. So you have to imagine Norm Macdonald's placing bets. He's gambling, right? He's having a good old time. And they're getting ready for Saturday Night Live on Saturday night, right? And Norm goes, listen, I got to place some bets, Artie. Here, listen, Chris Farley is a mess. I wouldn't be surprised if he died before the show starts, right? But I got to place these bets. Artie, you watch Chris Farley and make sure he doesn't do anything bad, which is hysterical in hindsight, right? And he goes, I'll be back. So Norm Macdonald leaves, right? And he's doing whatever Norm Macdonald does, right? And he's gone, and Artie's just sitting there, like, wow, Saturday Night Live. I was on Mad TV, but I was never on Saturday Night Live, right? This is awesome. This is what I dreamed of, blah, blah.
So this is Norm Macdonald's empty seat?
Yeah, this is Norm Macdonald's empty seat. Norm Macdonald comes back. Artie! God damn it! Where's Chris Farley? I told you, keep an eye on him. I told you he might die before the show. And Artie goes, well, he just went in the bathroom with Andy Dick. Oh, my Andy Dick! Oh, my God, what the hell? You only go in the bathroom to do two things with Andy Dick, and please, God, I hope they're doing drugs. All right?
So this is on the set of...
This is on the set of Saturday Night Live, right? And so Norm Macdonald delivers the line of the century. I hope they're doing drugs, right? And so Chris Farley comes out of the bathroom, and Norm's like, God damn it! You have a show to do. I'm not your boss, but you got to do a show. And Artie Lange's like amazed by everything. He's like, wow, they're just doing drugs in the bathroom, right? That Saturday Night Live, this is the place to be, right? And in the book it said like 1 month later Chris Farley died.
Yeah.
Right? Because even Artie Lange said, I could have, as high up as I was, Dirty Work was like the pinnacle of my career. I'm doing the Howard Stern show. I'm doing Dirty Work. Chris Farley, in theory, could have been me. Me and him intersected, and Artie Lange said, I love Chris Farley. I have nothing but good things to say about him. And he goes, and let me see if I can find the quote, so you might have to stall. But I think his quote was, because I don't want to mess it up. Here's Prime Norm. Toronto, Bob Saget.
You're looking for Artie Lange's quote?
Yeah, Artie Lange's quote. Chris. It says, Chris made a tremendous impression on me, and I wish he was still here. He was awesome. But the quote was, Chris Farley was a mess. And he goes, and that's a lot coming from Artie Lange.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like I said, I thought it was the funniest thing ever. But, I mean, you got to read it in context of Artie Lange. But it goes back to, why did all those guys get fired? Right? Well, Norm Macdonald got fired because the head of NBC said he wasn't funny, right? But what people, you ever watch Iron Man?
Oh, what, the movie?
Yeah, with Morton Downey.
A little bit of it.
Right.
I mean, I don't really know the movie that well. But...
Morton Downey was on Saturday Night Live for a year, right? And so basically, from the time Lorne Michaels started until Morton Downey, it literally had to be like, me and you joke around all the time that we have Indian stuff here, right? This is from the movie Blasphemers. This is the Cleveland Indians. That's NFL stuff. We didn't talk about Putin today. Oh, please talk about me today. No, we're not talking about Putin today. No Putin today, right? So when you think of Saturday Night Live, there's not stuff like that. There's piles of drugs, like drugs everywhere. Like, hey, Ted, you sit there while I do a line of coke. We're just going to do coke on Beacon of Speech. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. We don't really do coke on Beacon of Speech. We're making hyperbole, okay? But literally, Saturday Night Live, and you read it. Now, this is where I'm going to cut myself off and go to you. When you think of Chevy Chase and Saturday Night Live, what do you think of?
Chevy Chase and Saturday Night. Yeah. Well, the one thing is that he was only on there a year, I think.
But you think of drugs.
Yeah.
What do you think of when you think of not Dan Aykroyd. That's a bad example.
Belushi.
John Belushi. Yeah. Drugs.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
When you think of, with the exception of one or two people, when you think of Gilda Radner, you don't think of drugs.
Yeah.
But when you go there, you think drugs. And then Morton Downey was on there. Morton Downey said he barely remembers anything, so he was so whacked out on drugs, right? Drugs. And then Lorne Michaels left, and then he came back. And then they're all, Chris Farley's on drugs, Adam Sandler, he was on drugs, but he was drinking like crazy. Adam Sandler
was drinking?
He was drinking. Norm was placing bets like nobody's business. We all know Chris Farley was doing a ton of drugs. You see what I'm saying? So, like, part of the reason they got fired wasn't because they weren't funny. It's because I really think the NBC executives is like, listen, this frat boy crap has to stop. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? And it doesn't matter whether it's funny, not funny. We got people doing coke in the bath. You see what I'm getting at? So
I do know that Chris Farley was fired, right?
Yeah, he was fired.
And I think Lorne Michaels said that he went through it with Belushi and he wasn't going to put up with going through that again.
Yeah. And even when you think of Norm, they said Norm, he didn't abuse anything, but Artie Lange talks about it in the book. They said Norm might be the biggest degenerate real-life gambler that he's ever met. And he said, and that's saying a lot. And he said Norm had more money than he did. And he said he would drop $100,000 a night gambling, right? So at the end of the day, right, you're like, which vice is worse? You see what I'm getting at? And so Artie's throwing numbers around, and Artie's like, yeah, I lost $15,000 one night, but Norm lost 120 grand in a night is a lot for any gambler.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And don't forget, he's not making FU money yet. He doesn't have his own show. He's on Saturday Night Live, right? So, and you understand why he's probably divorced. You know what I mean? Now, Norm's got a show on Netflix, but when I think of Norm, I don't think of Norm making FU money like Adam Sandler's making. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, like I said,
Norm has a show on Netflix now.
Yeah, but it's you know why we don't talk about it? Because it's terrible. It is unwatched. Ted, I'm telling you right now, and I'm not trying to brag, but let's say that I change you to that chair, right? And I said, listen, I'm going to make you watch me and you on Beacon of Speech, or I'm going to make you watch the Norm Show, and you'd be like, I don't want to watch myself. I'm going to watch the Norm Show. Not the one from the 90s, but the one on Netflix. After 10 minutes of the Norm show, you would be so you ever watch uncomfortable comedy where you're like, I gotta turn it? Mm-hmm. You'd be like, please turn on Beacon of Speech. I would rather hear you re-yell things than watch Norm Macdonald. You see what I'm getting at? Because it is terrible. And like, he has, there's one episode, Norm Macdonald has Chevy Chase on, right? And Chevy Chase is just terrible now, right? Chevy Chase, his timing's gone. He's old. You could tell that his brain is fried, okay? And so Chevy Chase is talking to Norm, and Norm loves him. Like, everything Chevy Chase does is the funniest thing ever. So Norm's talking to Chevy Chase. And again, this is last year. This is not 50 years ago. Chevy Chase goes to drink some water, and he goes, oh, I just need a sip of water. Oh, I almost put it in my eye, right? And you're like, that was funny in 1978, but it's not so funny when you're a senile old man, and I've seen, I almost drank water with my eye 40 other times. You see what I'm saying? And like that episode, I'm like, oh, click that off. And then I turned him on with Jane Fonda, and it was like uncomfortable. You know what I mean?
The actual Jane Fonda?
The actual Jane Fonda.
The Norm Show?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you want, we can watch it. Me and you can watch a few minutes of it, and I'm like, oh, it is bad.
It's like, that's not two people I think of as being together. You know what I mean? It's like,
because Netflix, they have David Letterman on there, and he does like one show a month, right? And it's like, you know what? It must be nice to be retired and then pick your generic guest like Maya Angelou, or you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so I'm not a fan of that David Letterman show, but again, the new David Letterman show. Just like I'm not a fan of the new Norm show. Okay? But in Norm's defense, he's like, well, it's my show. I can do whatever I want. I can call who I want and who I don't want and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying Norm's lost his fastball. I'm saying that Norm is not in a good vehicle. He's got a guy who sits there and basically laughs what he says. Norm asks guests that you don't want to talk to. It's like, why don't you get a 30-year-old on there and mix it up a little bit? You see what I'm saying? Let's have some fun. And I wish he was a little meaner. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to see him lobbing softballs to Chevy Chase. Why don't you say, hey, you know what? If I know better, I say you had Alzheimer's. I'm looking at your hands. It looks like you're... And Chevy Chase would be like, I thought we were going to throw softballs today. Oh, I'm going to need another drink of water. Oh, I missed my mouth. I got water in my eye. You see, now I got pop on my face. But the point is that they all got fired on Saturday Night Live, right? And it was because drugs, right? And all those guys took certain risks. You know what I mean? Oh, and I don't know if you heard the latest controversy. Who was Corky Romano?
Corky Romano?
Chris Kattan.
Oh, okay.
I read Norm's book, and he said he did not like Chris Kattan because he thought he was a one-trick pony. Like, what was the skit he did where he, Monkey Boy?
Yeah, I know it. Yeah.
He's like, I'm Monkey Boy, or whatever the skit was. Mm-hmm. And Norm Macdonald said Chris Kattan had no talent. Right? Chris Kattan came out this week, and it was funny because of all the things that happened on Saturday Night Live. I got a new one. Chris Kattan did a movie, and you probably don't even remember it. I said it, Corky Romano, right?
Yeah.
And it was a woman director, and according to Chris Kattan, Lorne Michaels said you have to sleep with the director or else the movie's not getting made, right? Well, she's a hot girl. Well, Chris Kattan's like, well, I wasn't going to sleep. I have a girlfriend. You know what I mean? And so it goes back to, have you ever heard a story where Lorne Michaels made a male performer sleep with a female director? You've never heard that story ever, right? So Lorne Michaels, as soon as it came out, he's like, Chris Kattan did a lot of drugs. That's not what happened. If Chris Kattan slept with that director, it was of his own volition. I never told Chris Kattan to sleep with anybody. Right? But that goes back to what you're dealing with when you're talking about comedians. You see what I'm going, where I'm like, the road I'm going on is no matter what comedian you talk about, they all took risks. You see what I'm saying? Even if it's Dave Chappelle at 19 years old, he's 19 years old, he's doing stand-up in a comedy club. We can't even buy a drink there. He took a certain risk to fail. You see what I'm saying? Now, his risk was different than Artie's. Dave Chappelle didn't go work for the mob. And it's like, the whole book of Artie Lange is, what are you willing to risk? And Artie Lange said, I risk my life. I risk my life over and over. Over and over. And you know what? I'm going to do this pile, again, I'm not me. Artie Lange, I'm going to do a pile of cocaine, see if I live or not. We're going to have a good time. Whoa! Right? Off we go. I'm Chris Farley. Boom. Right? And he said everything, and then he even brings up sometime in the book, right? In other countries, he couldn't even do this. This is Artie Lange, American folk hero, is basically what it is. Because, and don't forget, the funniest thing, and this is why I can't get over, this is his third book. All these stories didn't make the cut of the first 2 books. You see what I'm getting at? It's like the Howard Stern book, Private Parts. Did you ever think there was... Howard Stern came out with his third book within the last year, and I can't remember the name of the book. Do you remember what it was?
Howard Stern's new book?
Yeah. Oh, Howard Stern Comes Again. And Howard Stern basically says, I regret everything up until now. Right? I'm sorry. I regret everything from the start until I got my Sirius radio job. I regret everything because I was a jerk.
And that's the only reason he got the Sirius radio job, was because of everything he did.
So Howard Stern says, I renounce everything from the beginning until I got the Sirius job. Artie Lange says, I renounce nothing from the beginning of life until the end of life. I look like a 70-year-old man. I would do it all again, except for the heroin. Kids, don't do drugs, don't do opioids, blah, blah, blah. Disclaimer, right? But it's like their philosophies are totally opposite. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I respect Artie's philosophy more than Howard's philosophy, because Howard Stern did everything he could to be worth $500 million. He stepped on, everything he could do. And he's like, I shouldn't have been so mean. I shouldn't have been a jerk. Artie Lange's like, listen, I'm a good guy. We're just going to break every rule to get where I need to go. Right? Well, who would you rather be friends with? The guy who's a nice guy who says, I'm going to bet my own life, or the guy who was a jerk the whole way up and he goes, oh, you know what? I regret being a jerk. Yeah. You see what I'm getting at? Yeah. So it's an interesting dichotomy, and that's why, at this point, it's ironic that it's a parody of the two, because they went in 2 totally different directions. Now, Howard Stern would be like, I would never eat as much as Artie. I would never gamble as much as Artie. I would never, because my life was the show. You see what I'm saying? Now, the Howard Stern show for a while was the best show ever. But now he's coming out and saying, I wish I didn't do that best show ever. You see what I'm getting at?
Yep.
Artie Lange's like, well, listen, when I was on the Howard Stern show, I put 100% into it, and I'm proud of my work. I wish I could go back and relive it, because it was fun. I had a good time, and I was paid handsomely to have fun with my friends, Gary, you see what I'm saying? Gary, Robin, Fred, and Howard Stern's like, you don't understand all the horrible things I had to do. Well, guess what? That's what you did. You should not regret it. You should be like, I need to get my show on top. It'd be like, what do you have to do to make Beacon of Speech successful? There's certain lines that I don't want to cross. Like in the Artie book, I dragged the show to a halt a couple of times today because I was reading quotes, but I did not want to read quotes with certain words in them, right? Mm-hmm. Well, Artie Lange would be like, what do you have to lose? Nobody's watching. Swear, swear, swear. People take you to court. You go to court saying, I want the right to say that word. I'm not comfortable saying it. You see what I'm getting at? Oh, Fred, well, that's why Beacon of Speech never succeeded. You weren't willing to cross certain lines. You see what I'm saying? Because I still have to live with myself, go to sleep. I don't think it's right to use certain words, even if you have the right to use words. Fred Hunt is not comfortable with them. Same thing with Ted. Ted, when I say certain words, you are not comfortable with what I say also. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. But again, we like to throw words around, and we talk about a lot of things, right? We talk around things. You know what I mean? We might not talk about sex, but we could say there's certain things that adults do in bedrooms that we're not gonna. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We can talk around, and especially me, I try to soften things up, even though I have a harsh voice. Ted, are you surprised that we were going to talk about this the whole time?
Yes, I am. I'm surprised.
What questions do you have for me about the Artie Lange book?
What questions do I have for you?
Now, again, don't forget, in the first 2 books, he talked a lot about the Howard Stern show, right? And he talked a lot about Mad TV. And they hated him on Mad TV because he was so out of his mind on drugs, like they hated him, right? This whole thing is the philosophy of betting your life.
How long was he on Mad TV?
I think 3 or 4 years.
Okay, and that was like mid to late 90s,
yeah.
probably?
Yeah. The same time Saturday Night Live was on. Because they did, even, my understanding was that, and again, this would be the last book, Artie Lange wanted to be on Saturday Night Live, but who's the gatekeeper of Saturday Night Live?
Lorne Michaels.
Lorne Michaels. If Lorne Michaels doesn't want you to be on Saturday Night Live, you ain't going to be on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And I think Lorne Michaels was like, we already have a Chris Farley. You see what I'm saying? We don't need 2 energetic black guys. We'll let him go to Mad TV. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But that was explained in another book. But again, I keep looking at the picture. He looks like he's 70.
Now, did you read? You said he has 2 other books. Did you read either of those books?
First book was Too Fat to Fish. It was a number one New York Times bestseller, right? I did not read that. And then he had a second book, and I'm drawing a blank totally. And this is going to depress you.
So I'm guessing you didn't read that one either.
I read the second one.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I read the second one. Because I wanted to read about his suicide attempt. And he was talking about how he was in a bad place, he was on drugs, mentally ill, blah, 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 and he tried to stab himself. Right? I read the second book, but not Too Fat to Fish. So all the stories I read, it was from the second book, and then he would reference the first book in the second book. Does that make sense? So I read his first book in one day. Or I'm sorry, I read the third book in one day. I read the second book in a couple of days. The first book, I only know from references of the third and the second book. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now, the question I have for you is, do you know what happened to his father?
Yes. He died.
Yes. Do you know how he died?
Yeah, he was basically working and again, I'm doing it from memory. He was working his ass off on the docks, longshoreman, blah, 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 right? And he went up on the roof to do some repairs. I can't remember if it was like the cable or cleaning gutters. And he fell off of the roof. He was paralyzed. They drained their savings to take care of the dad, right? And they had to build the ramp. And the dad was in terrible shape. So when Artie took that job, he goes, you don't understand, me and my mom had no money. We were broke.
See, because I always thought that his dad had his own business installing antennas.
Well, don't get me wrong, because I don't have it in front of me, but his dad was working his ass off as a young man, just like all young men. My back is killing me. I don't know if I can do this forever. So he could have been a longshoreman and then was doing antennas. You see what I'm saying? Right. Like he was this younger and then older. And then that's when Artie's like, listen, I'm not gonna go out the way my dad did. Falling off a roof and draining the money from the family.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave this here because if we're ever popular, this is gonna get somewhere.
What, that?
Yep. This is a picture of another man. I'm going to put it right up to the camera. That is Alan Freed. Okay? Now, Ted Coley, do you know who Alan Freed is?
Yeah, he coined the phrase rock and roll, right?
Right. Alan Freed died at 42 years old, which is much younger than us. He was an alcoholic and he was broke. because he made no money off of rock and roll. He coined the phrase. He did the Moondog coronation. Okay, and if we ever become popular, he's going to get up on the wall. He'll be in a prominent place. Because he died, right? And he died a young man, 10 years younger than us. Okay? He basically created rock and roll, and he got the shaft. Okay? The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum said, we are going to take your urn, and we're going to put it in the wall of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum. For some reason, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum said, we're kicking out Alan Freed. And the kids are like, what are you talking about? He's dead. He just sits there in the wall. Like, he is literally, like
he's not bothering anybody.
Yeah. Let's just say that we're dead, okay? And
we, on the other hand, are bothering people.
Yeah. So, say we prop up Fred and Ted. Say we get inducted to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they stuff us. Right? We take up space. And they're like, we don't want smelly dead Ted and smelly dead Fred smelling up the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Go bury him somewhere. Right? Alan Freed, I have to walk away. Okay? Because I remember watching it. I felt really bad for Alan Freed. Okay? They cut a hole in the wall. So there's actually a notch in the wall where they had the urn.
Yeah.
Right? So he's literally taking up 0 floor space. And the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is like, listen, we're going to kick him out. And the family's like, well, we don't have money to rebury him. He didn't have that much money, blah, blah, blah. So somehow, and don't ask me how, he ended up at Lakeside by, who's the untouchable, Ted?
Elliot Ness?
Yeah, he's like 2 grave sites away from Elliot Ness. And they basically made Alan Freed a tourist attraction at this cemetery. There's lots of famous people.
So he was cremated, right?
He was cremated, so they took his urn and they put it there with a beautiful head site. Or I'm drawing a blank on the word. Headstone. Yeah, beautiful headstone. So, but the whole thing is, Alan Freed is dead. He doesn't know all this is going on. And I thought it was really in bad taste of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to kick him out. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because lots of people have urns in their homes. Why can't you have... It's literally hurting nobody to put that in the wall. You see what I'm saying?
Did you take this picture?
No, my kid did. Because my kid, on... I think it was a Saturday, she said, by Monday, I have to go to a historical place by Monday and do a report on it. And we're like, we don't have any money, budgeted for this week. And you have to do it when? She goes, well, it was like Saturday night. And we're like, well, where are we going to go with 1 day notice, right? So we went to the Lakeside Cemetery, and we said, well, we'll take you to, is it Garfield's Monument? Garfield's buried at Lakeview or Lakeside or whatever.
I think so.
So we took her to Garfield's Monument. If you want, one day me and you will take a field trip to the cemetery if you want.
Mm-hmm. What are all these things at the bottom here? Like stones?
Yeah, they're just like remembrances, like, hey, we saw Alan Freed.
Oh, is that because they're rocks?
Yeah. Get it? Rock and roll, yeah. They're rocks. Yeah. So, but the point is that Alan Freed got nothing for inventing rock and roll. And me and you were talking about Kiss beforehand. Rock and roll is a multi-billion-dollar business. And the guy who's dead, they didn't even want to, bury him. They didn't even have money to make a gravestone for him. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, like I said, one day, maybe in 50 years, they'll be like, wow, Fred and Ted were way ahead of the curve, except for all the swearing they did on the Artie Lange episode. But the point is, because I want to step away from Alan Freed, I just want to tell you that I want to keep this here. We're going to keep that there. Alan Freed is going to be with us. Screw the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Okay?
Alan Freed and Putin.
Yeah, we're going to put the Artie Lange book up there, too. Because in my head, Artie Lange is what's great about America, and he's what's horrible about America, all wrapped up in one. Artie Lange is America. And Artie Lange, to me, is like the greatest libertarian there ever was. You know what I mean? Artie Lange basically says everything should be legal, except for heroin. Disclaimer, disclaimer. And he even says it. He ends the book. He says, let me be serious with you. I wouldn't take back anything. I'm an ugly dude, right? Who hooked up with tons of girls, who made movies in Hollywood and had a network show. And I was on Mad TV. I was on the Norm show. Nobody could live a better life than me. He goes, kids, don't do heroin. He said, honestly, whatever else I did, no regrets. Do it. Do what. Go gamble. Go drink. Do pot. Womanize. Hook up. Gamble. Do this. Do that. Just don't do heroin. You see what I'm saying? And if you are a good libertarian, that's what you should believe. You should believe the Artie Lange. Now, people like Howard Stern would be like, oh, well, he didn't work hard like I did. I'm like, I hate to tell you, Howard Stern, you renounced all the hard work that you did. And again, I used to say this all the time. We'll use me as the example. When I worked at Taco Bell, and I became manager of Taco Bell, my dad would say I worked very hard to become manager of Taco Bell, worked long hours, blah, blah, blah. When I was the manager of Taco Bell, all I could think of is this sucks. I worked hard, and they just want me to work harder. Yeah. And they're like, well, you haven't worked hard. Again, you might have worked hard as an employee and as a shift manager and an assistant manager, but you haven't worked hard as a branch manager yet. And I'm just like, you literally cannot win. And when I was young, I used to think that it was just Taco Bell, right? And now that I'm 50, not 50 yet, I'll be 50 soon. All I could think of is all corporations are set up that way. No matter what corporation, you may have worked hard in the past, but you're not working hard now. Mm-hmm. And everybody, and we're going to use his name, Joey G. Joey G, he was 16 years old and he got his first job, right? And for the rest of his life, he was looking for the imaginary easy job, right? Well, there are no easy jobs. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And everybody is looking for that magical easy job. And I've said before, I don't mind working hard for Beacon of Speech, because to me, this is not working hard. Okay? I love it. I want it to succeed. Okay? But at the end of the day, I want to work for Fred and Ted. You know what I mean? Because I have seen who gets ahead in corporations, right? And it's jackasses like Howard Stern, right? And it's people who step on other people. It just is. Okay? Now, you could be like, oh, there's always exceptions to all rules, right? But I'll say it again, not the job I work at now because it's the public sector. When I was in the private sector, the people who got ahead very rarely were the people who were the smartest or worked the hardest. Very rarely. Okay? And if you go back to my last 2 jobs before the job I'm at now, almost without exception, that happened. Now, you've worked at a couple of jobs when you, and again, don't say any names, you definitely don't say any jobs, okay? But the people who got ahead, did you get the impression they were the smartest or hardest working?
No.
No. Everything was an angle. Who do you know? Blah, blah, blah. Who do I step on? Who do I know? Who did I sleep with? I got a degree from a better college than you. Blah, 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 blah. Okay? Mm-hmm. Very rarely. And so, like I said, I admire Artie because Artie's just like, oh, I'm just going to keep plugging away, keep working hard, and keep calling it the way I see it. Right? And I'm like, I don't want to be Artie because I'm happily married. I have a beautiful wife, right? Beautiful children. And I'm not saying I want to go womanize. I'm not saying I want to go out and gamble. What I'm saying is I want to work hard and make this work. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, but it probably won't work. And then, like I said, we'll be like, who's the guy who cut off his ear?
Van Gogh?
Yeah, Van Gogh. They said when he died poor, right? So, like I said, this will sit on YouTube for 40 years and be like, oh, you know what? Maybe we should have listened to Fred Hunt, but Fred Hunt really didn't have any gimmicks. He didn't say the F word enough, or, at the end of the day is, his video production was really low tech. He had a picture of Putin and Alan Freed in the background. All right, Ted. Aren't you glad I came over and bummed you out today?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, big medical news. Beacon of Speech may technically end one day. Sooner than later. And I should share it with people who watch a video in case this is the last Beacon of Speech. I can't imagine it would be after that speech, but in theory it could be. Fred may be legally deaf. I know you find that hard to believe now that I yell and stuff. I flunked a hearing test. They said my hearing is terrible. I have 20/20 vision, actually a little better. And my hearing may be to a point where I cannot have the current job that I have anymore. So then I will really be poor at Beacon of Speech. So Ted's laughing.
Well, I immediately thought of Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah.
I mean,
I am not doing any Oxycontin. I'm telling. I already said no heroin, no Oxycontin, no opioids.
So Artie can hear perfectly fine, right?
Yeah. Well, that I don't know either. He probably can't hear because of Oxycontin either, but he's got so many other problems. Well, that's the whole thing. Again, me and you, we talk about this all the time. You know, Rush Limbaugh's like, I don't know how I lost my hearing. One of the side effects of abusing Oxycontin is hearing loss, right? And it's the same thing with me. You know who's to blame for my hearing loss? Me, right? I'm going to tell you right now. I yell. I've been loud my whole life, okay? Number one, I'm loud. Number two, the whole time you've known me, have you known me to listen to a lot of heavy metal and a lot of music?
Yeah.
Yes, loud music, too. And number three, the job that I have now that I'm not going to state what it is, okay?
Did you like how I sent you that text to cheer you up by saying there's nothing to hear anyway?
Yeah, I did. Three, the job I work at now, would you say that it's noisy or quiet when I'm driving?
Noisy?
Yeah, noisy. Who figures? Hey, there's a wall of sound behind me. I can't hear. Surprise, surprise. Right? I should have quit that job. Right? The job I have now.
Is the hearing bad in both ears, or is it just one ear? Or?
It's worse than this ear. But this one, they said it's bad too. Because this one, I just thought. But at the last job, when me and you worked together, right? All I could hear was industrial noise. There would be parts where I'm by, the cooling units, and I can't hear certain people because all I can hear is the cooling units. Because all I'm hearing is that industrial noise. So I'm convinced that the hearing loss started when I was at my desk, 6 feet from the hearing unit. It's not my fault, you better not sue us! Screw you, Fred Hunt! So if I was worried about my